welcome. My name is Mark Phelps, and I'm with TNS Employee Insights. Delighted to be here. TNS helps organizations measure and increase employee engagement to help drive better business results. And I have the privilege of moderating this session with three of our most valued clients. We have John Steele of Best Buy, Patty Muldoon of United Technology Corporation, and Moon Passano of Enterprise Holdings. So before we get into their stories, which they will have, and then be able to ask questions hopefully at the end, all of you hopefully will have on your tables a number of cards, green, yellow, and pink. And if you would pass them out so every person gets one of each. We're going to start each segment of this session by asking you for your input on a question that's relevant to each one of our group's topics. All right, so grab yours and be ready to raise your hand with the color that relates to your advancing, there we go. No. That relates to the topic around driving leadership accountability, all right? And also, when you do raise it, look around. If you're not raising the green card, you may want to look at people at your table or nearby tables, and at the break, introduce yourself and say, hey, what are you doing? So a great way to connect with other folks. So as we start, the first thing we're going to do, if we can advance this slide. The question is, to what extent do you use business metrics to increase engagement and leader accountability? To what extent do you use them? Green means business metrics are an integral part of your components, of your messaging. Yellow is we've tried with mixed results. Red says we haven't used that yet. So let's raise our cards for a human heat map here. Looks like Moon, we have a lot of yellow, some pink and green. Why don't you share a little of your message? Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I've been with Enterprise Holdings for about 23 years now, and I've worked in the HR capacity for about 20 of those years. And I'm currently responsible for leading our employee opinion survey project. So I think that sort of qualifies me, at least that's what our good friends at TNS believe. Looking at the colors that you showed out there, you are all at a place where we were at one point in time as an organization trying to figure out how is it that we can use our business metrics to engage our leadership team and then help that drive the results for the business. And it's an evolution that we all go through. We began this back in the late 90s with the first engagement survey that Gallup put out there. And we tried for several years to understand what really was engagement. We know the 5 factors, but how do we utilize those to drive better behaviors across the company? Eventually we got to a point where we thought we were doing the right things, but there was something missing. Although it felt right and it seemed to be good, we couldn't necessarily justify and correlate that. So we tried some internal measurement comparisons, we still just weren't getting it. So finally, with the assistance of TNS Employee Insights, we were able to put together some analysis where we actually provided to them our core business metrics, and we asked them to figure out what's the correlation between those metrics that are truly driving our business and our engagement scores. And then within that, we tried to figure out, okay, now that we know what those correlations are, how do we capitalize on all that to make progress? As we embarked on that, the challenge that we have is we have over 9,000 locations across the globe. We have over 14,000 managers that run their locations very independently. It's great as a theory to say, as a company, we're going to. But when you're relying on 14,000 managers to independently do this on their own, it really is challenging. And they run very independently, very autonomously. So as a local branch manager, you are helping hire your employees, you are training your employees, you're leading, engaging your employees. So to try to convince them that this is going to be good for them was a bit of a task. So here's what we did. We said, let's look at this as not a means to an end. Let's look at it really as a means. We did a pretty good job of explaining to employees why engagement is important. And what you see up here on the screen is nothing new. It's not earth-shattering. We all know that engaged employees they build better relationships, they increase productivity, they help us decrease our costs, they help us really solidify our brand, and all those things out there. And we realized it's not so much about just being happy or being favorable. It's really about engaging in a way that's going to truly produce results that are missing in their portion of the business. So we looked at our core areas that we rank our employees and our operations on, and the first one is service. So if you've ever rented a vehicle from Enterprise, National, or Alamo, hopefully you had a great experience, because that's our number one priority, is customer service. And our employees know how important it is, because this is how simple we make it. If your service is below our company average, you're ineligible for promotion. You can't move. You'll be stuck at that location until you improve your service. So we have a nice, really easy hook into that. But then we said, all right, if we are trying to drive engagement and connect it to service, through the correlation analysis that TNS provided to us, we identified the 5 survey instrument items that were most strongly correlated with it. And now here's where the HR part comes in, where will be really familiar to most of us in the room. We identify our managers that are doing very well in service, and we go out and we ask about the behaviors and we reinforce what they're doing. We then go to the opposite end of the spectrum. We spend time with our managers who don't have good levels of service. We specifically talk about these 5 items. We share ideas that we've seen work from our other managers who are scoring really well. And with their input, we identify the obstacles, and then we identify solutions. But we don't stop there. We then take that information, we go to their employees in small groups, and we ask them, are these the real hurdles that you see every day that are getting in the way of allowing you to service our customers? And if they are these solutions legitimate? Can you be committed to these? Are they realistic for what's being expected of you? So we said the data supports it, the manager believes in it, the employees believe in it, and then we go to work. And that go to work means we take those action items, we put them into the TNS system. It's a great, easy system of tracking your progress toward your goals. And then along the way, we reward and recognize our employees for the work they've done and the improved results that they've achieved. Initially, it's a bit of a risk. We weren't sure, but as we worked through it like we believed, you go back and you begin to track your progress. 60 days, 90 days, 6 months down the road, those operations began to slowly improve. So now when we go back and resurvey, we know that our management team is going to listen to us because we've already seen it work. We do the exact same thing with our profit rank. So when we look at profitability, at Enterprise, we pay our management team a portion of the profits that they produce. So if you're not running a good operation, then your compensation is directly impacted that, not like a lot of operations. So the managers who aren't performing well, we typically don't need to go to them. They typically come to us and ask, help me because I'm not making as much as I should have because for a variety of reasons. So what do? We go back to our analysis that was provided to us by TNS, identify those 5 items that we know are most strongly correlated to driving profitability, and we do the exact same thing. There's a theme here, there's a consistency here that I'm gonna continue to talk about. Manager, talk to me about the obstacles standing in the way of you being able to do those 5 things. Let's come up with solutions. Great, now let's bring your employees in and let's validate those exact same things again. So what I said about service is exactly true with profit. We come up with great solutions, validate employees, implement, and then track our progress along the way. And then the final one is we look at retention. At Enterprise, when we look at retention, we identified internally that we know high retention is correlated with high service, strong growth, and strong profitability. Nothing else is correlated that way. So retention is the one factor that directly impacts all of the others. So, same exact process. We sit with our managers who are challenged with retention, and we talk through these 5 items, and we ask, what are the obstacles? All right, let's develop solutions. Now, once we have solutions, we sit down with the employees, and we validate those obstacles are real. We get their commitment to whatever the action items are that we came up with. And by the way, that step is a bit lengthy because rarely do what we come up with as a manager, is that exactly what's implemented. The employees have a tremendous amount of say in what we do. So So ultimately, where all of this lands is, we have to think about this, about what's the one common denominator. If you looked at all those slides, there was really a word that stands out, and it's manager. I said we've got over 9,000 locations, 14,000 managers. We have to rely and capitalize on what our managers do out there. Again, it's a great company philosophy, but the execution comes down to the manager. So the way in which we go about utilizing that power is they have to be actively engaged in every single thing we do. We do very little from the top at Enterprise. We may set the expectation, but we don't build action plans. That happens at the local level because we're such an autonomous organization. We're so decentralized. And the great news is now looking back, and when I go out and spend time with the operators and the team that I'm part of, it really does make it easy to walk into an operation with a manager and look at their retention, or look at their service, or look at their growth, or look at their profitability, and where they're not performing, I can have these exact same conversations with them. They don't look at this as an HR initiative. In fact, I would say at Enterprise, we don't have any HR initiatives. We only have operational initiatives that are supported by a variety of different departments, one of which happens to be HR. So this is not something that HR does. This is something we assist with. They take ownership because they see how, if they can drive engagement based on the items that we showed in the slides, they see the correlation to them running a successful business, which means happy customers lead to happy employees because they're making money and they've got promotional opportunities. So.
Thank you. Got advance for me one. Excellent. Our next segment is going to look at leader accountability through the inclusion lens. So the question is, to what extent is your organization using inclusion as a lever to increase engagement, employee engagement, and leader accountability? You can see green, good job; yellow, making an attempt, but room of improvement; pink, no concerted effort. Let's see how we have. Ooh, I love a number of greens, a lot of yellows, and a few pinks. Patty, you can take a look at the room and let's share your story.
Thank you. A lot of yellows out there, a few greens. I'm going to come after you and get some ideas after this. So I'm from UTC. I'm Patty Muldoon, and I lead employee engagement there. And so I'm going to ask you to raise your hands again. How many of you, when I say UTC, know exactly who we are and what our products are? Not too many. Leave your hands up, please. So I'm going to say some of the brands that we have, and if you recognize those and now know who we are, raise your hands. Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. Any of you ever fly? The engines on the aircraft. Otis Elevators. What's more? Carrier Air Conditioners. I think they're working really hard in here right now because it's kind of cool. Kidde Fire Extinguishers. I could go on and on. So I think what I'm trying to set the stage here with is that we have a level of complexity in our corporation that drives how we do things. And so we have 200,000 people around the globe. We have nearly every country represented, and the diversity of our products is very wide, right? So we are a company heavy on engineers. We are increasingly led by financial experts. So as you can imagine, measuring and metrics are actually really one of our strengths, right? You know, I think of the little hamster wheel, and you put a metric in front of our managers, and they just go, 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 go. So we want to use that strength, right? But what I want to talk to you about today, this is a story of sort of a journey of our diversity and inclusion, right? So journey starts with compliance and EEO and measuring representation in our workforce. We want to reflect the workforce. The workforce should reflect our customer base, which is really global, right? So we have a diversity scorecard that is so robust. We have literally 500,000 data points on that. We've been tracking it for a long time. We have done really well in increasing our pipeline in of folks who we know we need to reflect that diversity in our workforce. What we see is we have that leaky pipeline, right? We're not as good at keeping all of those. So the end result, the net result is that while we're doing well pulling people in, we're not retaining them, and we're heading towards our goals at a very, very slow rate, right? So what are we gonna do about that? It's people come in and then they're not really feeling that included, right? They're not feeling that they belong enough to stay, at least not to the level that we want, right? So a quote from a very wise individual, Andre Tapia, diversity is the mix, and inclusion is making the mix work. So as we recognize this, we reinvigorated our global diversity and inclusion strategy a couple of years ago, and really inclusion became a much more prominent business priority because we see that that is where our gap is, right? So what you see on the top half of the page here are sort of the three pieces of our global diversity and inclusion strategy. So it's the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace. And the workforce, that's measuring a representation really great at that. Inclusion is more about that workplace piece. And marketplace, that's some of our great partners out there, Diversity Inc. and Catalyst, and working with them to help us. Now, we have had a commitment to diversity for a long, long time, and you see those awards at the bottom that we're very proud of, and it just shows that we are committed. We are trying really hard. The Disability Equality Index, really proud of. That is a very new one for us as of last week. I had to change the slides. And the best places to work, that's the Corporate Equality Index for our LGBT partners, friends, employees. And Inroads, it says top 10 strategic partners. Inroads is a nonprofit that is for underserved youth and getting them experiences in the workplace, internships, right? We've not only been the top 10, we've been the top corporate partner since 2007. And we're the top corporate partner in terms of conversions of those interns to full-time hires. So we have a lot of success, right? Latina style as well. So in that strategy and framework, this slide just shows you where have we invested. We've created what we're calling the Inclusive Leader Curriculum, and all of our leaders are going through this curriculum. So some of it is on-site, some of it is digital, globally dispersed, but it's very experiential. So conscious inclusion, kind of going through some exercises to make us aware that, wow, I didn't really realize that I wasn't making these decisions in an inclusive way, right? And managing inclusion. And then quality conversations, this is the piece that's digital, and this is really cool. So this is about, really it's supporting our performance management transformation as we go to more frequent feedback conversations. So we're investing quite a bit of that. Employee resource groups, we're getting our arms around these. We've had employee network groups for a long time. Interestingly enough, in our survey, our global survey that we put out, we ask a question, are you a member of an employee network group? And we got 19,000 employees to say that they were part of an employee network group. We said, we have no idea where these people are. So part of our strategy has been to create some structure around what should an employee resource group do? What do you need to actually be funded and recognized by the company? And here are some tools to get our arms around these. We have had now 2 annual summits for the leaders of these employee resource groups, and it is really exciting. We had one last month, and it was great. They put me on right after lunch to talk about metrics. And here I am again right after lunch to talk about metrics. But it's really empowering those people who have a lot of passion for those employee resource groups. And you can just see by the numbers that we have incredible participation there. And then in addition, inclusion, we tell managers, inclusion, we need to work on inclusion. And they say, how do I do that? We've put together a toolkit that they can access, right? Resources from our partners, Catalyst Diversity, Inc., Diversity Best Practices, and also some small little tools that they can work with, right? So these are the things that we're doing. This is what we're investing in. So how do we measure that? Now, how do we hold the leaders accountable? I told you we're really good at metrics. Inclusion is not as easy to measure as how many people do we have in our organization that reflect our customer base. So what we've done is we've been doing an employee survey for a long time with TNS. And what we did was we created, there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors because all the questions were already in our survey, but we created an inclusion index. And we really brought this up in our results to give it a very prominent place and say, hey, all these questions, there are a few of them that are in that what you typically think of as like that traditional diversity category, but there are all these other things, feeling included, communication, two-way communication, that really affect a person's feeling whether they belong and are included or not. So we pulled those together and provided that. And then we said, and don't just look at the average. I mean, we're so good at looking, what's our average favorability? We really looked at what's the spread? You know, you've got a division that has a lot of groups under it. What is the spread between the lowest inclusion index and the highest? We need to bring that together. That's what inclusion is about, right? Bringing everyone to the middle to feel like they are part of it. So it's part of the survey. Then here's the key, is that what are the other places that managers are already paying attention to, that they get measured on, and they're on their little hamster wheel running toward those metrics? We have this great thing called a control tower, okay? And this is, every group has a control tower, and it's a version of a balanced scorecard. It has financial metrics, it has delivery metrics, it has employee metrics, you name it, right? So the survey data, the survey scores are part of that. So as we embed that inclusion index in there and tell managers work on inclusion, it's on their control tower that they're working already. So this is where this works for us. You've got your own ways in your company that you drive your leaders. You can't put this off to the side. It needs to be integrated in whatever it is that you do, right? D&I balanced scorecard. And this is where we're still on the journey, okay? We're not at the end. I told you about the diversity scorecard that we've had for a long time. Measures women in different position levels, race, ethnicity, where our gaps are. We've got the heat maps. That's not balanced. What we want to do is bring in that human piece of it, and that's the inclusion piece. And so we are vetting and socializing and having employees and managers all collaborate to really say, how can we simplify this thing, first of all? Because we're not getting anywhere with the 500,000 data points. It's really not taking us to the next level. And so we're putting things in like the inclusion index and others. It's really taking, our strength is really those rational, linear thinkers that we have that do so many wonderful, innovative things. I mean, we have, disruptive technology in the aircraft engine world right now, and in the elevator world right now. And how do we get them to take what is maybe not a natural strength of theirs, which is that warmth, compassion, mindfulness, and grow that muscle and get them to focus on it. So with the tools that we've given them, and then the focus on a balanced diversity inclusion scorecard, that's where we are, and that's where we're beginning to drive. But the inclusion conversations are really exciting, and the inclusive managers curriculum, where we take them through those experiential exercises, are really exciting to hear and talk to the managers and the executives afterward that say, wow, now I get it. And the first group we took through was our President's Council. So it was our CEO and the division presidents of Pratt & Whitney, Otis, CCS, et cetera, UTAS. So it's a big deal. And these are purposely small, so you can't read all of it because, I I've got in your decks, you can see, oh, what are those specific questions that we ask in the inclusion index? And our partners at TNS helped us to validate that those are the things that hang together and that we should be putting in that inclusion index, but it may be different for you. I really just wanted to sort of share, this is the way we're coming at it. We are so dispersed, so distributed, and we are talking about global diversity inclusion now. It started with this US compliance, and we are talking about global diversity now. So we really need to take these systems and these metrics and get everyone aligned and get a good cadence with them. We're too big to get everybody in a room and have a huddle and say, let's do this now. But this is our take on it. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Here we go. Our third segment, here's the T, the start poll, is to what extent have you built a compelling story to connect the importance of engaging associates with leader accountability and success of your business? Compelling story means the green is it's a high bar that you've built that compelling story and leaders have embraced it. Mixed messages on yellow and you haven't built that compelling story. Let's see everybody's, only a few greens. Look for the greens in the room so that you can network with them. A lot of yellows, reds. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to now present John. You want to talk about your work at Best Buy?
Yeah, so I have represented one of these colors at each point during my Best Buy journey and at other organizations as well. When I was red, the first thing that I needed was a framework, a consistent way to think about how I wanted to frame up what I was going to talk about. And to create that compelling story, I borrowed something old from, I believe it's the 70s with Campbell, but its performance is a function of three and only three things. Okay? First, it's the talent. Do you actually have somebody to go after something? Next thing is engagement. Do they actually have the motivation, the interest, the energy to pursue it? And third and lastly, do they actually have an opportunity to do so? And what I really like about the simplicity of this message is it can actually apply, and I think good stories do apply, to things beyond the world of work. So I'm an IO psychologist, and I usually start with work, and I keep trying to bring things back to work, but this kind of helped centered me. So one of the ways to think about it is if you're learning to play a musical instrument, if you're interested in dance, even what kind of a parent you are, sports, baking, and of course the world of work. If you're not engaged, if you're not bringing your full self, you're not going to have full performance. And that speaks volumes to the leaders who you talk with. So of course, also during my journey, I've spent a lot of time in yellow being somewhat successful, being able to land the message. And the part that I really struggled with here is it's almost like the bad reputation that Americans get when they go abroad, right? And so what happens when somebody doesn't speak your language? The prototypical American, I'm not saying you do this. We just say the same thing louder, right? We just keep repeating it and keep repeating it. Don't you understand? Or we make up words like caro instead of coche, right? How effective is that? Not really the most effective. And so what I would challenge those of you who self-assessed as being yellow, be willing to try something new and to tell the story in a different way. For me, I love to lead with data, but it was actually, can you instead lead with the people who you're telling the story about? Okay? And then finally, green. If you're green, like, kudos to you and give yourself a pat on the back. And if you want to accelerate that even further, create storytellers in your organization, people who can carry on that message for you, because the greatest impact of engagement isn't when it's coming from HR, it's when it's coming from peer-to-peer, individual to individual, and everywhere in between. So who am I? It's not really important. What is important is I get to lead a fantastic team, and I get to work for an organization that values my contributions. If you want to learn more about me, half of you are already on your phone anyway, you can go to LinkedIn. All right. So how about the organization that I have the privilege of talking about today? So I'm going to commit a bad speaking faux pas. You can tell I'm not a good speaker to begin with, so I can see no one's surprised here. And I'm just going to read at you. Okay? Best Buy generates nearly $40 billion annually. The company offers expert service at an unbeatable price more than 1.5 billion times a year to the consumers, small business owners, and educators who visit our stores, engage with Geek Squad agents, or use BestBuy.com or the Best Buy app. 70% of the US population lives within 15 minutes of a Best Buy store, and the company also has operations in Canada and Mexico. Nationwide, Best Buy has more than 1,400 stores and locations, including large format and Best Buy mobile stores, and employs more than 125,000 people. And just for the sake of space, what didn't make it on there is every minute that our stores are open, they take in 400 pounds of recycling, which if you're wondering what that equates to and to put something on it, it's 2 elephants an hour. So just if you're interested in how the math kind of works out on that kind of thing. So hearing some of the messages earlier and for me to be in the moment, why did I do this? So the first thing is to actually show our communications team and legal, who may at some point be listening or feedback getting back to them, I can actually stay on script a little bit, right? So far I'm starting off okay. More importantly than that though, what's important for me in the message here, so this is all public facing. This is all information that you can access right now on bestbuy.com. It's the way the organization would like to portray itself to our world of customers, potential employees, and investors. So what do you notice about these statements? To me, being an analytical person, first thing that jumps out at me is how much quantification is going on here, right? We've got dollars, we've got trips or visits, those kinds of counts. We've got US population being segmented. We've got time. Got number of locations and number of employees. So what I learned early on in working at Best Buy is that quantification matters, and to have a compelling story, you have to know your audience. In this case, the audience really appreciates having the numbers, at least as a backdrop. So creating a compelling story. So the first thing that I did after getting to know my audience a little bit better is to start with the end in mind and saying, what matters most to you? And regardless of the leader that I talked to, I got the same 3 answers. They care about their employees, they care about their customers, they care about the overall profitability. Who is surprised by this? Okay? Consequently, what they may or may not realize through that is they also care quite a bit about engagement. And engagement is a huge competitive advantage and strategic lever. So to give you some examples of how this played through, what we did is segmented our survey data, and we've been doing this for a number of years, so everyone in the organization was comfortable with our color scheming, of which you would either be green, yellow, or red. And for the purposes and simplicity of this presentation, I'm just showing you the delta between green and red, but you'll get the overall story arc. So from a financial perspective, 360 basis points difference between our red locations and our green locations in comps. Now, I'm seeing some confusion there, so let me stop for a second. Why did I say basis points? We're largely a group of HR people. Because that's my audience. That's the way they like to receive information. They talk basis points with their financial partners. They talk basis points with their marketers. So as an HR professional, I wanted to talk basis points with them too in order to land my message more effectively. By the way, if you're wondering what this actually means for a given leader, this is the difference between you being on a performance improvement plan with little to no hope, quite frankly, or you getting maximum bonus. So this delta is massive to our leaders. Okay, from a customer perspective, 120 basis points in NPS, which on the Best Buy side is kind of our holy grail of customer satisfaction indices. An employee, no surprise, largest delta there, 980 basis points in turnover. So each of these metrics weren't selected by me. These are our leaders' metrics that matter most to them to represent the categories that matter most to them. The other thing too that can happen when you are in a large dispersed organization is this concept of what if we all came together and operated as one Best Buy? What would that actually mean for our organization? And then in this case, you can see just a small improvement in engagement nets over $84 million. Massive effect to the bottom line. So for all those project managers that are complaining, if I only had this system and it costs $30 million, if the organization would only invest and do something in this way, which costs $10 million. And for an organization that's gone through a transformation, is looking to become a high growth company, these pennies matter. And the strongest part about this is, what does all this cost? To get 980 basis points on key employee metric, 360 basis points key financial metric, 120 basis points key customer metric. This costs nothing. This is the way we should actually be showing up and behaving day in and day out. Of course, for us to do that, we needed to have a mindset shift. So the first shift that we wanted to do was to steer leaders away from the notion of employee engagement as a construct and refine that to what does it actually mean and how does it actually feel day in and day out, which is what we've called everyday engagement. And for everyday engagement to come to life, it requires a lot more than the old way of doing things. So when we look at our least successful leaders historically, and this is true not just at Best Buy but elsewhere, what is the typical employee engagement rhythm? It's typically you've got an annual survey. You've got some portion of the employees who complete the survey. Afterward, the manager has some version of results. And what does the manager typically do? They choose one or two things, put them into an event, usually not a very meaningful event, and they check the box that they've done engagement for this year. Not much happens the rest of the year. It's coming time for another employee engagement survey, so what happens? Manager dusts off their notes and says, don't you remember when we had Crazy Hat Day? Don't you remember when we had Sundays at work? And why are they doing this? Because they want artificially for the employees to then give them a higher score on engagement. This isn't the way to get to the kind of profitability, customer, and employee metrics that I talked about earlier. So instead, what we've asked is that you craft a plan, and not a stale plan that's going to be 365 days, that's way too old. Instead, craft some meaningful actions that you can go after. The moment that you've reached those, pause, reflect, celebrate, and then what's the next need that the team has? And let's go get that. And let's reinforce that day in and day out. Now, moving to the everyday engagement strategy, the other thing that's really difficult is you've got to have a high level of, I hate the term soft skills, so I'm going to call it the really difficult skills that leaders need to have, because they need to engage with their employees showing individualized consideration. You actually have to know something about the people you lead in order to engage them. These one-off events, these things that are great for the team as a whole, these programmatic things, they're necessary, but they're insufficient conditions in order to get the kind of results that you're looking for. And again, going back to frameworks that have helped me, so if you look at Csikszentmihalyi's High's flow model, that's been particularly helpful when you want to think about individualized consideration. Again, the thing that I love about this model is you don't have to apply it to work, you can apply it to anything you're interested in. Sport, dance, music, baking, whatever the case may be. So essentially what the model says is you're trying to drive a strong balance between the challenges of the task that you're being presented with, and then the skills and your confidence in those skills and actually in order to complete that. And so let's think of a trivial version. So boss gives you something super, super easy to do. Can you mail this letter for me? I was watching old Arrested Development reruns the other night, and there was a really, really good episode where Job throws a letter into the ocean. So that's why it's in my mind. So say they give you something like that, and then that becomes the norm of the kind of work you get. How do you immediately feel? You're bored. You're apathetic. And the truth is, your performance in something that's so simple actually starts to degrade, even though you completely have the skill to handle it. Now let's go the other way, where Coming from this conference, CEO has the expectation that every single employee in your company tomorrow will be 100% engaged every day. How are you feeling there? You're stressed, you're overwhelmed, and you probably don't know where to start. So again, if you can meet the employee where they're at, design the work in a meaningful way to them, and continually get feedback on that progress, that's the way that you encourage everyday engagement. The other thing that we've really tried to highlight here is the preciousness of each and every interaction that occurs, because each and every interaction is an opportunity to either make a deposit into that employee's energy bank, or it's a withdrawal. And you think about what things that you can do when you have a really, really hefty balance. You get innovation. You get going way, way above and beyond to delight customers. You get incredible results. You get 360 basis points of comps. Okay? You can imagine how the other way goes too. Let's just say best case scenario, it's turnover. Okay, so the other thing that we wanted to do to shift is to create more of a two-way street, to more of a dialogue. And so, again, if we go back to the old way of doing things in the prior considerations, oftentimes the annual, or however often you do it, engagement survey is either the wish list or the complaints of the team members with the manager expected to resolve all these. And somewhat it almost feels like a little bit of a negotiation process or a little bit of a ransom. I can bring my best self to work, but you better do X, Y, and Z if you want to see that. Doesn't feel really good on behalf of the manager, doesn't really represent the employee, and it's not super effective. So what we've really tried to uncover and reinforce is the notion of there is actions that are going to take place by the leader, but there's also actions that are going to take place by each team member. And some of that can be as simple as, you're saying you want more opportunity for X. Well, then I need to see that you can be prepared when you're given Y, so that when X presents itself, that you can jump on it. It doesn't have to be, use the term from earlier, it doesn't have to be rocket science, but it's important that we consider that engagement is the conditions that occur, the great employee experience, but it's also a personal individual choice that's affected like things like your disposition, spillover, what's happened recently with you. And the more that the leader and the employee, and employee to employee, can take time and uncover those, the more powerful it's going to be. The other thing we did from a storytelling perspective that I don't have slides on, but I just wanted to comment on briefly, is we've taken the effort to highlight for given leaders and to actually tell their story end to end. So what you saw here was I started with the end, what the metrics actually look like, without the series of behaviors that lead up to that. Instead, what we did, or in addition, I shouldn't say instead, we actually took people through the journey of what does it look like to be a GM of a store that used to be red and go to green? What were the behavioral changes that occurred? What does the leader attribute that success to? What does the team leaders attribute that success to? What do the individual contributors attribute the success to? So that's been our journey, and also my journey in being able to tell a different and more compelling story with data. So I'll turn it back to Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.